Kota Farms, short grain Japanese style rice. Interestingly enough, not that dissimilar from risotto. So we're gonna make a risotto with this rice. We have a little tomato concentrate or tomato paste, smoked paprika. This is Nduja. It's a spreadable salami that comes from Italy. This one is actually made by La Quercia, which is a company based in Iowa. And then we've got the rice and a little bit of cheese to finish. We're gonna make a crunchy salad. So the first thing we're gonna do is make a little crunchy salad that's gonna go on the top. Now, this is a mandolin. This is actually Japanese mandolin. I guess the French mandolin is usually stainless steel. This is typical that you'd find this in a kitchen supply store. What we came across a couple years ago that we really decided we liked was this mandolin, which is half the size. And we'll use it for something like this application. So don't ask me why there's a mirror here, because I never look at myself in that, but usually what we can do is take that off. We've got some celery. These are all these celery ribs, and what we're gonna do is, I've got them cut so they're all the same size, about where they'll fit on here, maybe one less on the mandolin. And what I can do is I can stack them up, and this is gonna be the economy of movement here, because we're gonna slice, and I'm slicing 4 pieces of celery at a time. Instead of doing one, we're going 4 times as fast. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a salad of this celery. We'll do some fennel. We can go from the other side here. Celery, fennel. It's the parsley leaves that are gonna go on the top of the finished risotto to provide some freshness, some crunch. Got some fennel, these nice little fennel bulbs. What we'll do is cut this in half. That'll give us about the right size. It'll also make it so that it fits on our little mandolin here. And we'll start from the top. I love having contrasting textures, like this rich, creamy risotto that's then gonna have this bright, crunchy salad that goes on top of it. And it keeps the food interesting, keeps it light, and perfect dish for making at home. The licorice notes in fennel are just so perfect to go with this tomato, and especially the Nduja if you're using it. Should be close to enough. Okay, so you can see already it's crisping up in the water. I'm going to go ahead and add some of these picked individual parsley leaves. This is Italian flat leaf parsley. I don't have anything against curly parsley, but we don't often use it. Although I imagine you could use it if you wanted to. Okay, we're just gonna set this aside. Good trick too, we've got a fair amount of ice in here. If I wanted to get this out right now and I took this out, there'd be ice all in the middle of it. And so if I wanted to get rid of that ice in a more efficient way, I could add a lot more cold water, but not ice, to this, and it would melt out all the ice cubes and make it so that I could extract my salad from the ice quicker. Okay, now onto the risotto. So we have onion. So the way I like to mince onion is it's peeled, obviously. And then we're gonna just take a little bit of the front off here. And then instead of, you may have been taught to do this, create all these different levels. What we like to do is just use our knife and go thinly. And when I cut, I want to cut as far back as I can without separating it, and straight through. And at some point I'll get to the other side and use my thumb to hold it and maybe go a little slower so that I don't cut my thumb. And then we're just going to cut it finely. Sometimes the cut seems like it's a little too long, so we'll angle it and we'll come back. But the idea is to create minced onion. And when we get down to the end, if we need to, we can chop through the last little bit. So don't throw this away. This is great for using for stock, which you could make your chicken broth with the chicken bones. saving your carrot trim and your parsley stems and your onion trim, all of those things make a beautiful stock. And that's actually what we did to produce the chicken broth that we're going to use to make the risotto today. We're going to start in casserole with olive oil. And this is one place where I'm definitely not shy with the olive oil. I'm actually also going to put some butter. And I like to use both olive oil and butter when making risotto. Now, having a wide, flat pan like this, or a rondeau, kind of a casserole dish, is pretty ideal when making risotto because you want to spread it out into a thin, flat layer. And the reason is for the rice to cook evenly, it can't be stacked up. So if you had it in a tall pot like this chicken broth here, the bottom would cook much faster than the top, and you'd have mushy rice in one part of your pot and crunchy rice in the other, and which is part of the reason why you're always told to continuously stir risotto, because the only way to keep the risotto from overcooking in certain parts is to keep stirring it and to keep turning it over. Cut open our rice. So what we're looking for now in the olive oil and the butter is to get this onion soft. If we don't take this time to get the onion soft enough now, and we added the rice too early, the onion will never cook and will be crunchy in the end, and you'll taste crunchy bits of onion in your final risotto. So we're going to take a few minutes and take our time here to get this nice and soft. And part of adding the butter adds a little bit of moisture, because no matter how fine your butter, there's still some amount of water in it, and that water is part of what you see along with the juices from the onions steaming here, getting me teary-eyed. As our onions have begun to soften, we'll start to pull aside some more of our flavor components. We've got some garlic. The garlic has an intense flavor, an intense aroma, and so it's always good to mellow it out when you're putting it in dishes, unless you intend it to be that way, to be really sharp. But it also has a certain amount of sugar, and if I added it in the very, very beginning with the onions, has a tendency to begin to burn a little faster or caramelize a bit faster than, say, an onion. So while my onions are sweating here, I'm chopping my garlic. And again, we're talking about time management and good cooking. So we've got our garlic here. About now is the time when I could add that in. Our onions are reasonably soft at this point. We'll go ahead and add in the rice. You can see the short grains of the rice are very similar to what risotto would be like. Now I'm going to toss the rice in the onions and the warm fats. That helps to coat each individual grain of rice with fat and makes it not stick together, which we want to have risotto that's nice and fluid and not sticky. This is smoked paprika. We're going to add some tomato paste. Just stir those through to coat and dissolve. You can see already the heat on the paprika, which is a pepper, is beginning to dissolve and bring out those aromas and the pigments that are beginning to color the rice. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and add some white wine. We want it to glaze, cook away the alcohol from the white wine. You can see already the starch has begun to be released from the rice. You get that little bit of slight viscosity to the cooking liquid. At this point, however, the rice is still essentially raw, so we're going to need to cook it some more. I'm going to season in stages here with another good pinch of salt. And essentially, my wine has been absorbed. I'm going to go in with my first addition of broth. I like to do it in 3 separate additions as opposed to constantly adding. So that was my first addition. Make sure it's not sticky. That's another reason why relative constant stirring of risotto is necessary. But it's also why I'm cooking this in a large casserole that's large enough that you can see this is really more or less one fairly thin layer cooking. And that helps me to have this risotto cook evenly by not being piled so high or so deep. I've slowed the heat down a little bit, and you can see it starts to stick slightly. And that's a sign that your heat might be slightly too high. What we can do is just turn it down. That's why there are knobs on our stoves, is to be able to adjust. And I've said that cooking is a lot about moving water from one place to another, concentrating flavors or diluting them, or adding water to roasted chicken bones to gain a broth. It's really just about moving water around, but it's also about controlling heat. So part of being a good cook is being able to control heat and to listen to the food that you're cooking and hear this gentle bubble as opposed to a rapid popping. You can see all the small little bubbles. We've got this right at the perfect temperature where every time I'm adding the broth, we're still cooking rapidly, but we're not scorching. While our risotto is gently cooking, we go ahead and pull aside our final garnishes. We have some andouille, some cheese. We'll need a bit more butter. And this is a San Marzano tomato sauce. You could also use fresh chopped tomato if you wanted to. I tend to like to add it later in the cooking process because it does have some amount of moisture to it, and part of making a perfect risotto is to keep the consistency at the end appropriate. So that should be just about my last addition of broth. And you can see there's a natural viscosity to the liquid. All the flavors of the paprika and the tomato have permeated into the rice. And as we concentrate this broth the rice is cooking in, those flavors will concentrate into the grains of rice and give a lot of flavor to the risotto. So at this point, see the starch developing in the broth that surrounds the rice. The rice is about 80% cooked, and we're going to be ready to add some of the flavor components to finish the rice. Before we do that, we've got the crispy salad here. I added some more water to melt the ice. So we now can pull our crunchy salad out. You see it's nice and vibrant. This is kind of a great dinner party kind of dish because everything can be made ahead except for the rice, and as the rice cooks, you're enjoying your company, they're interested in what you're doing in the kitchen, and you're finishing this, and then when it's done, all at the last minute, you bring it to the table and everybody gets to eat all at once. At this point, I'm going to add the andouille. Now this is a cured pork product, so it hasn't necessarily been cooked, although we're cooking it now, but it's cured in the same way that prosciutto would be cured. And as we break it up, it'll dissolve and stir into and provide this incredible flavor and aroma to the finished rice. And certainly this will be delicious without it, but I obviously recommend it as an addition. You can see right now our rice has a consistency where it levels on its own. If I pile it up, it spreads back out. That's that wave that we're talking about. That's that perfect consistency. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little taste, see how the grains of rice are. So we're just about perfectly cooked. The rice isn't crunchy, but it's not mushy, which is exactly where you want to be for risotto. So that's the point that I'm going to add just a little bit of concentrated tomato sauce, which will add acidity and vibrancy, and also help to add that last little shot of moisture that'll wrap around the rice and give us the perfect consistency. Last step is the finish, what the Italians call mantecare, or to finish with cheese and butter, which is a great verb to have in your language. And this is already so rich that it doesn't need a ton. I mean, that was not a terrible amount, but I think it's worth it. Seasoning is pretty much spot on when I tasted it. There's been the seasoning that we added in stages. Certainly the saltiness of the cheese, and the andouille has its own salt and richness. At this point, the dish is done. Clean the edges. And then I like to go ahead and put this raw, crunchy salad all around. When you think about the impressiveness of a dish for a dinner party, to bring this to a table full of people that are hungry can't be a bad thing. That's it.